It's great to be in the SEC. Welcome back to the SEC Recap Podcast. I am Ben Warren, and this is episode 7 of our 2026 SEC Team Preview Series, working through all 16 teams based on expected wins from my preseason Precap model. We started with the bottom tier in the SEC. That's Mississippi State, Arkansas, Kentucky. And then we progressed through Vanderbilt, South Carolina, kind of teams that I think are going to be right at that bowl expectation baseline. Today, we reached the team sitting at number 11 in projected wins in the preseason model. That is the Florida Gators. Now, Florida coming off a 4-8 season last year, midseason coaching change, and a pretty major roster reset. Gators also return a 1,000-yard running back, several of the most, I would say, interesting and talented young players in the conference, you could say, and a defense with enough proven pieces to support a pretty quick turnaround, especially with the right coach. Today, we're breaking down what happened in 2025, that 7-5 projection that you're going to see here in the model, and every game on the schedule, the quarterback competition, the players who could change the season, realistic floor, ceiling, and of course, the final SEC Precap prediction. The Precap model projects Florida to finish 7-5 in 2026. And unlike several teams we've looked at, covered already, the strict game-by-game picks that you see here on screen land on the same record. Florida is favored in 7 games and has about 6.6 expected wins. So at first glance, that looks fairly stable. But look at where the 7th win comes from. Gators right now only a 53% favorite against Oklahoma. Before that, they're underdogs in 3 consecutive SEC games against Auburn, Ole Miss, and Mizzou. Then they visit Texas, Georgia, and Atlanta for the cocktail party, and then enter the back half of the season with a brand new coaching staff. And right now, I think an unsettled quarterback position. So the question is not whether Florida has enough talent to reach a bowl game. I think they definitely do. The question is whether John Summerall can create a functional offense quickly enough for 7 wins to become the baseline, or whether this schedule-driven projection that you see here, assumes the transition goes almost perfectly. We can never assume that, right? Especially not with this kind of roster overhaul and coaching change. So really quickly, before we break down the 2026 schedule, let's recap what happened in 2025. The Gators were pretty bad. And I've mentioned in previous episodes on these team previews that they were a trash football team last year. And they were. I stand by that. Now, they can be much improved this year, but let's take a look. Finishing last season 4-8 overall, 2-6 in the SEC, averaging just 21.6 points and 341 yards a game. They allowed 24 points, 377 yards a game. And those numbers just don't, the numbers do describe a team that was somewhat competitive at times to kind of stay attached to the game, but never consistent enough to be in control of the ball game. Offense was clearly a problem. Florida converted only 34% of its third downs. They threw 14 interceptions, scored 7 points at Miami, 7 at Kentucky, 10 at LSU, 11 at Tennessee, or against Tennessee. When the defense created a manageable game for the offense repeatedly lost leverage through turnovers, negative plays, stalled drives. It was just a disaster from start to finish. There were some flashes, like they upset number 9 Texas. Dallas Wilson, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, produced one of the best true freshman debuts in program history. They beat Mississippi State, not necessarily a marquee win, lost to Georgia by 4. The finale there, Jadan Baugh rushed for 266 yards as they beat Florida State 40-21. Those moments are important because they show that the roster wasn't completely void of talent. But the season included a home loss to South Florida. That was an Alex Golish squad who's now at Auburn, who the Gators will face this season. And then the dismissal of Billy Napier in October. Billy Gonzalez finished out the year as interim, But Florida entered December needing completely new staff, new offensive identity, new answer at quarterback after DJ Lagway transferred out of the program. So my cleanest description of what happened in 2025 is this. If Florida had the talent and the offensive competency, they could have had an okay season, but it lacked enough stability to win consistently. The defense, I think, repeatedly kept the Gators within reach. Baugh gave you a really good, stable, dependable foundation. And you do have some young players there that showed legit upside, but quarterback inconsistency, like I said, the lack of third down success, and then operating through that coaching transition really just put the season 6 feet underground. Taking a look at the projection snapshot, let's separate out a few numbers that you see in these team previews, separating out the projected record from expected wins. The projected record is 7-5, right? That's games that the model projects Florida to be at. So full season simulation has the Gators at 6.57 wins, which is going to round up to 7. But the strict game by game picks also produces 7-5 because Florida is above a 50% favorite against 7 teams on the schedule: Florida Atlantic, Campbell, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Florida State. Now, some of those could change as we go throughout the season. Keep in mind, this is all preseason data. This could change dramatically over 2 to 3 weeks. But the expected conference result is almost exactly 4 wins with a projected SEC record of 4-5 with the 9-game conference schedule. So the model gives Florida a 76.6% chance to reach bowl eligibility. You got to like that as a baseline coming into the season, especially considering how disastrous last year was. The middle 80% of outcomes runs from about 5 wins through 8. So that's a pretty comfortable margin to get into the postseason. The chance of 8 or more wins is only about 26.6% chance, and the probability of 10 wins is barely above 2%. And this is where I think it's very important for fans to understand how to temper expectations, because in the preseason, everyone thinks that their team is going to go 10-2 with their schedule. Everyone thinks that their team is going to go 8-4, 9-3, 10-2. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Some teams have to fall in the middle. I think South Carolina has that upside, but probably realistically exists somewhere in the middle. Florida, same story here. They have the upside. The talent is there, but it's a completely new coaching regime, right? And you're bringing in an unknown commodity at quarterback. So I lean more toward that 6-7 win baseline with 8 potentially as your upside surprise. Model's not burying Florida. 7 wins is very credible, right? A bowl is more likely than not, but it's not seeing Florida as a hidden contender. The difference between 7 and 9 requires a real meaningful breakthrough in some of those games where Florida is going to be a little bit of an underdog. Not like South Carolina, where the projected record's set above the strict picks. Florida doesn't have that extra probability kind of hiding beneath what you see in the headline numbers here. 7 favored games producing a 7-win projection. I feel pretty good about that. So they got to protect the games that the model gives them. If you lose Oklahoma or drop one of those late games, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Florida State, you've got to replace that win somewhere with Auburn, Ole Miss, or Missouri. And I think that's going to be much easier said than done when it all comes down to it. So what is the path to 7 wins? Let's break down the schedule a little bit more here. Kind of bring that up. By the way, if you're watching here on YouTube, thank you for being here. Appreciate the support as always. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please like and subscribe so you don't miss any of the 16 full team schedule breakdown previews, predicting all the wins and losses, just talking about the probable path to the postseason for a lot of these teams. And while you're here, check out the merch at bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. Got a lot of good stuff on there for everyone. All right, path to 7 wins is pretty easy to see here. May not be easy to execute, but it's pretty easy to conceive. I'm going to start with the 6 strongest favorites, okay? It's Florida Atlantic, strong favorite there, Campbell, South Carolina, at Kentucky, Vanderbilt at home, and then at Florida State. All of those games, you're above a 60% favorite That's above a 60% win probability. If you bank those 6, you really only need one more win. And the cleanest one to me is going to be Oklahoma at home. That's a great spot to get Oklahoma, who I do think is going to be pretty good, but they're also going to be in this middle tier, this sort of chaotic middle of the SEC. So great upside, strong baseline, but these swing games are really going to determine the outcome. Oklahoma is going to be a big one. I got the Gators as a 53% favorite with a projected margin of right around 1 to 2 points. It's going to be the closest game on the schedule for me, and the 7th win in the strict model picks. The alternative is to steal one from this opportunity tier. Okay. I think they're going to be an underdog at Mizzou. I think they'll be an underdog versus Ole Miss. And I do think they'll be an underdog on the road at Auburn. That's an Alex Golish squad who got them last year in the swamp. Now, I know it's a different coaching staff, different team, different variables, but I do think that will be a tall challenge for Florida on the road there in Jordan-Hare. This is why the first half matters so much. If you open with the 2 non-con games, then you play Auburn, Ole Miss, and Missouri in consecutive weeks. If they get one of those 3 before beating South Carolina, you reach your bye week with a 4-2 record, and then you have a much more comfortable margin to the bowl line. But if you lose all 3, that Oklahoma game becomes mandatory, and then the late schedule remains manageable, but very little room for one of those upset losses that you're going to need. The schedule to me has 3 very clear sections, and I break this down with every team. If you haven't seen the others, I really encourage you to go back and watch them in order, starting with Mississippi State, because you're going to see this expand as we go through the teams with higher and higher upside. So it'll make a little more sense. 3 clear sections. The first section is that 2-game runway with the Florida Atlantic and Campbell, but the second is the pressure window. That's what I call the opportunity tier. That's your Auburn, Ole Miss, Mizzou. Games that you can be in, but you are going to be an underdog. Auburn week 3, host Ole Miss, travel to Missouri. You host South Carolina, then you visit Texas. You're going to be underdogs in 4 of those 5 games, but 3 of those margins are going to be within 5 points, I think. So tough, but winnable. There's opportunity there. Okay. That's why I call it the opportunity tier. This is where you can move above or below that projection. The final sort of category is the long shot tier. That's going to be your game at Texas. I think you're going to be an extreme underdog there. Texas is going to be very, very good this year. And then Georgia. Those are my number 1, number 2 teams in the SEC this year. True long shot opportunities. But after Georgia, your schedule does shift a little bit. That's when you have Oklahoma coming to Gainesville. Then you go to Kentucky, you host Vandy, and then you close at Florida State. I think Florida's going to be favored in all 4 of those games. So final month of your schedule here is not going to be optional. You don't need to beat Texas or Georgia to have that successful first half under Summerall, but you do need to handle the games where the roster, the home field advantage, and the matchup profile give you a clear advantage. And again, I'm going to harp on these swing games all season as we go through. Some of these will shift. Again, it's preseason data, guys. You're going to see this swing a little bit over the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season. But by week 6, we're going to know what all of these teams are. This is how the model has worked every year. By week 5, week 6, we know exactly what these teams are. And so any games that fall after that week, we'll be able to really dial in the predictions. So 4 games tells us almost everything about Florida's range. Swing game 1, Oklahoma. You can see the win probability and the projected margin here on screen. It's a defining game because it's not only the closest, it would be the 7th win on the model card. Let me go back to that real quick just to remind you all. By the way, all this is on my socials and the website, secrecap.com. You can get all this for free. Okay. To me, Oklahoma is going to be that 7th win. Swing game number 2 is that trip to Missouri. 41% win probability, about a field goal, most likely. Mizzou's the kind of opponent that Florida has to get past if you want to move out of that middle tier toward the upper half. It's a road win. Mizzou's always, well, at least for the last 2-3 years, It's a quality opponent. It's going to be a quality win, especially on the road. Swing game number 3, Ole Miss. I do think Ole Miss is going to be very good again this year. They have a great schedule set up to contend in the postseason. 38% win probability there, projected margin between 4 and 5 points. That's going to be a home game. And then swing game number 4 is that road test at Auburn. Tougher. 37% win probability, a little less than a touchdown underdog. But a loss there doesn't damage your season. But you get a win, kind of changes everything. So 7 and 5 becomes very stable if you win 1 or 2 of these 4. But if you lose 3, you're really going to be looking at more of that 5-6 win type of season. So my 3 keys to beating that baseline, what do they need to do to get above that 7-win projection? It's going to come down to these 3 things. First, Florida's got to settle the quarterback position and then protect whoever wins it. Okay, whether it's Philo or Tramell Jones, you have to give Florida efficient early down offense and keep an on-schedule passing game. Second, offense has to make Jadan Baugh the identity. Regardless of who's at quarterback, I think Jadan Baugh needs to be the centerpiece of that offense, not ask an inexperienced quarterback to carry the entire operation. Lean on your proven running back. Number 3, returning defensive core has to turn experience into disruptive plays. More third down stops, more sacks, more takeaways, more short fields. It sounds very cliche, but it's true. You have to be disruptive, especially if you don't have a quarterback in full command of the offense. You just need to give your offense more opportunities. If those 3 things happen, you don't need a perfect roster. You don't need an elite passing offense. You just need a functional offense and a really physical run game, which I think they have, and make the opposing offense earn it. So let's talk about some of these players. Always, this is not a roster breakdown. I'm not a personnel guy. There's a lot of podcasts that break down personnel a lot better than I can. I really look more at the data, but we can't go through an episode without mentioning some of the key players. Number 1 is going to be Philo. He's Philo, however you say it. Georgia Tech transfer, redshirt sophomore, went 21 of 28 for 373 in his start against Gardner-Webb. Transferred from Tech, so he has experience in Buster Faulkner's offense. Main question, obviously, is whether that familiarity can stabilize what Florida's going to have in the passing game. The other guy, stay on here for a minute, Tramell Jones Jr., also competing for that job. I think they need to come to that conclusion early and then get behind the guy. Tramell Jones went 21 of 35 for 191 and 2 touchdowns across a couple of appearances last year. He's a former Elite 11 finalist. If he wins the job, I think they're going to need to accept a little bit more volatility than if Philo's the guy, just because of his knowledge of the system. And I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing his name right. I didn't look up a pronunciation guide, so if you're screaming at me through the screen, apologies. But the key for the offense for me is really going to be this guy, Jadan Baugh. Rushed 220 times for over 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns in 2025. Also added 31 receptions, 185 yards through the air, 2 more scores. Closed the season out with 266 yards against Florida State. He is going to be the foundation for your 2026 offense. I think if you're going to win at Auburn, Missouri, Kentucky, Baugh is the player that's going to travel most efficiently for that. Now, your receiving core, how do you make it easier for a quarterback with less experience in this offense? You give them great receivers. Dallas Wilson, I'm going to go throw Vernell Brown in there as well. But Dallas Wilson, 12 passes, 174, 3 touchdowns, despite only appearing in 4 games, excuse me. Had 6 catches against Texas, 111 yards, 2 touchdowns. Big size, explosive playability. He gives you a player that can really stretch the length of the field. Vernell Brown, 40 passes, 512 yards, contributed in the return game a little bit. They also brought in Micah Mays Jr., Eric Singleton Jr., who had some moments in their spring game. So receiver room is not going to be a limitation for the Gators this year. I think it's just going to be what happens at the quarterback position, because that's your biggest limiting variable for receiver production. If you do get some dependable quarterback play, you've got enough receiving talent here to really stress some defenses. Defensive side of the ball, the defense was not dominant in 2025, but they were still quite functional. I think a centerpiece this year could be Myles Graham. Um, Led the team with 76 tackles, added 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 4 pass breakups, and 8 quarterback hurries. He's going to be a guy that they're going to need to lean on. And we'll just throw in Jayden Woods at Jack. He had 28 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks as a freshman. So they've got some young talent across the secondary, and they've added some experienced bodies through the portal. So Brad White doesn't need an elite defense immediately. They just need to be competent, organized, physical, and a little disruptive. If they can give their offense a couple of more possessions a game, that's going to be a huge boost, especially when you look at how tight some of these swing games are going to be. It really all comes down to what this new staff does. John Summerall is head coach. He's a proven head coach everywhere he's been. 43-12 career record, 4 straight title game appearances. He holds his teams accountable. He's tough. He puts pressure on them in the right way. Buster Faulkner at OC. He was the 2025 Football Scoop OC of the year, 3 seasons at Georgia Tech. Very quarterback-friendly, pro-style hybrid. Okay, he's going to take over that offense as a play caller. Brad White taking over the defense after 8 seasons at Kentucky. Mixed reactions there. But during his tenure, Wildcats averaged 22 points allowed per game and 344 yards allowed. He developed 14 defensive draft picks. The staff has a very coherent fit, I think, especially in a place like Florida. Summerall wants a physical, demanding program. Faulkner has a proven relationship with Aaron Philo and a back who can anchor the offense. The challenge is going to be the speed at which they need to get this product going. You're changing systems, personnel, daily expectations all at the same time. So the staff has to establish an identity quickly. It has to solve the quarterback dilemma, tackle communication issues before the schedule exposes them in the later part or the tougher part of your schedule. Guys, we're closing it out here. Thanks again for hanging through this episode. Let's recap the floor, projection, and ceiling for the Gators. Realistic floor, I think in absolute terms, is going to be 5-7. That's the outcome that starts with Florida beating the games that they're supposed to win, Florida Atlantic, Campbell, but maybe you fail to settle that quarterback and offensive line before SEC play really gets going. You lose 3 of those early underdog games. Maybe you fall to Texas and Georgia and then drop Oklahoma plus one of those late favored games. 5 wins would be disappointing, but it is within the model's 80% range because transition risk with quarterback and with a coaching staff is real. And this is something that fans often overlook in a new system. There's always optimism. It's easy to be optimistic, but reality serves that a lower win probability is more likely than high upside, okay? The model projection is 7-5. That's the cleanest path with your 6 strongest favorites: Florida Atlantic, Campbell, South Carolina, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Florida State, plus you get Oklahoma at home. That gives you a 4-5 SEC record and a bowl appearance in Summerall's first season. That would be a win. Guys, that would be a hugely successful season. It may not be the season that fans want, but it would be a massive step forward over last year. It doesn't mean the rebuild's complete, but it means you protected your schedule, you established a baseline, and then you go into 2027 with a very clear winning direction. And that should not be overlooked or scoffed at. Now, the ceiling, I think, is probably 8-4. I'm not going to say 9-3. I know a lot of fans are probably willing to go 9-3, but I think 8-4 is the realistic ceiling. You need to protect all 7 favored games and win 2 of those 3 early opportunities against Auburn, Ole Miss, and Missouri. Okay, it's possible because of Baugh, young receiving talent, defensive core, but it's not the most probable outcome because so much depends on positions where the Gators enter the month of August without a real proven answer. So my final verdict, final precap prediction for Florida is going to be 7-5 overall, 4-5 in the SEC. Gators have a 76% chance to reach a bowl. Schedule gives the new staff a very legitimate path to winning in this first season. Baugh's your offensive foundation. Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown, give him proven commodities in the passing game. Myles Graham, Jayden Woods, give Brad White a defensive core with which to build around. But the entire ceiling sits at one variable. Quarterback, well, two variables, and the offensive line. If you get competent play there, 7 wins is realistic, and 8 or 9 enters the conversation. But if that quarterback position remains unsettled, like we've talked about, and the line can't protect, they're going to struggle to finish drives, and some of those maybe late November favorites become much less comfortable. Defining game is Oklahoma. Win it, and you get to 7 without requiring an upset, a true upset. But if you lose it, you've got to steal one that you're going to be an underdog or be nearly perfect down the stretch. They have enough star power and schedule structure to get to 7. But this first Summerall team is only going to go as far as the quarterback and the offensive line play allow. Guys, that's going to do it. Of the SEC Recap 2026 preview series, the Florida Gators. Next, we move to the team sitting at number 10 in the rankings, the Oklahoma Sooners. Model has Oklahoma sitting at, well, tune into the next episode to find out how many wins it projects them at. We're going to break down the schedule, roster swing games, final verdict in the next episode. Guys, follow SEC Recap on X. Visit secrecap.com for all my content. Like and subscribe to the YouTube. It's great to be in the SEC. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.